Where are you, honey?
I'm in a forest. It's late. Evening, I think. I'm I'm sitting on a horse.
That was Lena's mom, Debbie. Ever since she found out that Lena had been that is, Daisy's boyfriend Roger in a former life, she'd been badgering Lena to let her try it for herself. This was early in June. Grammy's hip was recovering well and she was walking a lot better, although she kept the cane. I think she liked it too much. So once she was back in practice, we arranged a big weekend family get-together. Lena's parents, Steve and Debbie, drove up for the weekend. We all went out for a meal and a chance for the in-laws to meet for the first time. It was great. Lena's folks are brilliant, and Debbie never misses a chance to tell the story of how they met. Steve used to be a firefighter. That is, until his back went out, and he literally pulled Debbie out of a burning building.
Draped unceremonially over his shoulder, with a pretty unique view of his ass. And I remember thinking, I gotta get me a piece of that.
And the rest, as they say, is history. I'd heard that story about 7 or 8 times already, but Mom was thrilled and Dad was impressed. He and Steve hit it off comparing their work-related injuries. Then, next day, we took Debbie up to Grammy's so she could work her magic. Debbie was so excited I thought Grammy might have trouble getting her to relax, but she dropped like a stone. Grammy did her countdown thing, and Debbie didn't even get past 7, which is where we came in. After taking her back to a childhood memory of her 5th birthday party, Grammy took her back through time to the forest.
I'm watching the road,
She continued.
I'm waiting. For something.
What's your name, dear?
Grammy prompted.
Do you know?
Marie Trenchcomb.
Then she turned her head a little and smiled.
There it is.
She sighed.
The coach.
Then her expression turned more serious, more intense.
I pull up my mask and lower my hat. Then I draw my gun.
Suddenly she gasped.
I'm holding up the coach. I'm a highwayman. A highway woman?
Grammy could tell that her grip on the memory was slipping.
Try to stay with it a little longer, honey. Marie, you're robbing the coach?
Yes, my husband is the coachman. We arranged it. All goes well. No one gets hurt, and we get a little richer. Although, if any of the passengers has any jewelry I like the look of, I may just keep it for myself.
Lena and I were watching open-mouthed. This was incredible. Then, before Marie could ride off, Grammy brought her back to us. Debbie was ecstatic.
I was a highwayman,
She beamed.
Lena, baby. I was a highwayman.
Yes, Mom, I heard.
Wait till I tell your father.
She gushed.
I bet he'll be so jealous.
We left the office and went back to the living room with Debbie practically bouncing with delight.
Doesn't it bother you that you were, well, a criminal?
Grammy asked. Debbie paused thoughtfully.
Well, technically, I suppose.
Then the grin returned.
But an actual highwayman. No. Even better than that. A highway woman. I didn't even know that was possible.
Grammy smiled and I poured us all a glass of wine.
Do you have any impression of where this was?
Grammy asked, picking up her notebook. Debbie thought a moment, then said,
Cliff? No. Clifton? Is that a real place?
Grammy nodded.
Yes, just outside of Bristol, in England.
Debbie couldn't contain herself. She threw back her wine and I poured her another glass.
Lena, baby,
She said.
could I have one of your cigarettes?
Sure, Mom.
Lena handed one to her, and we all lit up.
Don't tell your father.
Debbie said conspiratorially. Then she turned to Grammy.
Do you think we can find out what happened to me?
Grammy chuckled.
To Marie? Yes, well, that's the next part of my job. and the most challenging. But we have a name and a location, and given her actions, I think there's a good chance we'll find her. Although that may be from her trial.
Debbie was shocked.
Do you think she was caught?
I'm afraid most highway persons met with an unfortunate end.
Grammy explained. Debbie took a long, thoughtful puff of her cigarette and asked,
What did they do with them? Do you know?
I believe it was usually hanging.
Grammy replied carefully. Debbie gasped.
Do you think she might have been?
Well, if she was, there should be a record of it.
Grammy confirmed. Lena and I looked at each other. I think we could see that, no matter what happened to Marie, this was another story that Debbie would never get tired of telling. The following day, Mom took us on a shopping trip. That is me, Lena, and Debbie. Lena's kind of used to my mom by now, but Debbie was definitely surprised. She made a fatal error early on by accepting a cigarette. From that point on, she was doomed. Since my mom started smoking again, she's become relentless. Worse than me, worse than Grammy. So every opportunity, Debbie was plied with cigarettes. I swear, you could get addicted just standing close to my mom. So I guess her little secret would not be secret much longer. What's that? What about what happened to Marie? Okay, it's compounding the timescale, but we've got a lot to cover. So technically, we couldn't find Marie, but Grammy tracked down a record stating that her husband Elias was arrested and hanged for highway robbery. A little more digging revealed the awful truth. Elias was arrested without warning before taking a coach out. So on that fateful night, the driver was actually one of the sheriff's men, and when Marie attempted to hold up the coach, it all went horribly wrong. She managed to ride away, but she had been shot. They never found her body, and it was presumed that, fearful and badly injured, she likely fell into the Clifton Gorge, 300 feet deep. Debbie loved it. Okay. So the next weekend, Lena and I hightailed it up to Grammy's just to get out of Mom's way. And we thought we'd succeeded until she turned up out of the blue, in full disaster mode.
They can't do it,
She declared in an utter panic.
after all this time, all this planning. They've suddenly decided they can't do it.
Grammy tried to get some sense out of her.
Calm down a second, Janet. Who can't do it? What are you talking about?
The church.
Mom replied exasperatedly.
They've suddenly changed their mind.
Mom had got it into her head that it had to be a church wedding, with all the trimmings. And we all knew that wasn't going to be easy. But she had found a church willing to carry out a gay wedding. But now it seemed that idea was finished.
There's nothing else for it.
Mom decided frantically.
We'll have to try California.
Grammy snorted derisively.
Janet, we are not going to California.
We have to.
Mom asserted.
There's no other option. I can't think of one. Can you?
Mom, I began. Then Lena said quietly,
We could have it here?
Mom was just about to fly off on one, but Grammy held up a hand and turned to Lena.
What was that, honey?
We could have it here in the garden. I mean, it's big enough and it's beautiful.
Mom opened her mouth to say something, then closed it suddenly. Then she took off, straight through the kitchen and out the back door. We followed after, and found her standing, hands on hips, surveying the garden, planning it out in her mind.
It could work.
She mused.
We'll have to move the bird bath and the...
You're moving nothing, Janet.
Grammy ordered.
Just work with what you've got.
Mom huffed, but continued her mental mapping, then declared.
It's still going to take a lot of work.
Then she gasped.
What about the reception?
Grammy smiled.
What about the wayfarer?
The hotel?
Yes, I know the manager. I think he'll let us use their ballroom.
And so it was decided, there and then, that the wedding would be held in Grammy's back garden. I was thrilled. Lena, baby, you're a genius. Lena blushed as I gave her a big hug. Then she looked at Mom, heading back inside purposefully, and said to Grammy,
Kathy, you realize she's probably going to be moving back in whilst all this is going on?
Grammy nodded with a sigh.
I just hope you both appreciate my sacrifice.
Grammy was spared for a couple of days, thanks to Richard. It was about 2 weeks later, and we were now under orders to drive up to Grammy's each weekend to help Mom with the arrangements. Mom opened the door and led us through to the living room, where we found Grammy chatting with a big old bear of a man, with soft gray eyes behind a pair of old-fashioned spectacles. He stood up to greet us like a true gentleman. He smiled warmly, and as soon as he spoke, I instantly recognized the voice.
Well, this must be Zoe and Lena. Delighted to finally meet you in person, and aren't you both adorable?
Richard? I think I blushed, and I know Lena did a little curtsy. Usually she only does that to be either playful or sarcastic, but I swear this one was genuine. Grammy saved us from totally embarrassing ourselves.
Richard's brought us some exciting news.
We shook hands with Richard and joined him on the couch.
Yes, I was just telling Catherine that I included my personal recommendation with each submission. I figured that might get their attention, and it certainly did.
There was a stack of about half a dozen folders on the coffee table.
One of them is a 6-figure offer.
Grammy said excitedly. No way, I gasped. Grammy nodded, but Richard interceded.
Actually, Catherine, if you'll take my advice, you should really pass on that one and consider this.
He retrieved one of the folders and passed it to her. She put on her glasses, opened it, and began reading carefully.
Okay, so it's nowhere near 6 figures up front,
Richard noted.
but you're getting a considerably higher percentage of the book sales than the industry standard. Plus, you retain any additional rights. Long term, this is by far the more lucrative offer.
I don't recognize this firm.
Grammy commented.
They're quite new, but growing. This is likely to be a big break for them, provided they can handle the marketing and distribution, and I can help them with that.
Grammy closed the folder confidently.
I trust your judgment, Richard.
She smiled.
Let's do it.
Richard grinned.
I'll have them email the contracts.
Actually,
Grammy said, casting a glance towards the kitchen where Mom was probably busy on the phone.
I'd like to take a trip. Meet them in person.
Richard was surprised, so Grammy explained.
Janet is organizing the wedding. We're holding it in the garden.
We'd love it if you'd come.
Lena said eagerly, and I nodded in agreement.
Why, thank you. I'd be honored.
Then Grammy added, lowering her voice conspiratorially.
I need to get out of here for a while.
Richard nodded.
Understood. I'll have them lay on something for you.
So that was it. The book deal was in. The wedding plans were coming together. And then, with just over a week before the wedding, Laura appeared.